If you've ever felt jealous and resentful when a friend or a family member has seemingly dropped the weight effortlessly, then you're in the right place, because we're going to be digging into that today. We're going to be talking about why this happens, why it can feel so incredibly difficult for you and easy for everyone else. And, we're going to talk about the emotional side of that, but we're also going to dig into what is going on in your body and what you can do to actually get some traction and start seeing some progress, because there's a lot of factors involved. There's a lot of biology, there's a lot of environmental factors and things that ultimately mean there's a lot more going on than you just not trying hard enough or being lazy or not having enough willpower. In most cases for the women that I work with, it's not a case of a lack of effort. It is much more about the imbalances that are going on in their body, or their body's needs not being met, that are blocking their body from actually burning fat efficiently. Welcome to the Thriving Metabolism podcast. I'm Louise Digby, registered nutritional therapist and women's weight loss expert. I help women over 40 to repair their metabolisms and support their hormones so that they can lose weight for good. When we get to the root cause of what is causing the stubborn weight, what's going on with your hormones and metabolism, weight loss becomes a happy side effect of optimizing your health. And it's a much easier process than restricting yourself and starving yourself and punishing yourself in the gym, and much more sustainable as well. So join me on this journey. I'm here to help you to discover a better way of eating and supporting your well-being inside and out. I'm sure most women have experienced it at one point or another. You've been really disciplined, you've been eating really clean, going to the gym, doing all of the things. You step on the scales and you've not lost anything, maybe just a couple of grams, maybe you've even gained weight. And perhaps you've been making these efforts alongside your partner who has not been trying quite as hard as you, but they step on the scales and the weight has fallen off them. Or maybe you have gone shopping with your friend who is as slim as she's always been, and yet she's complaining that she looks fat in the top that she's tried on. These moments can feel so triggering, and it really digs at that raw part of you that has been putting in everything and trying harder than anyone you know. And that part of you is so raw because it's filled with so much stuff. The resentment that you're not getting the results that you would expect to get, the fear that nothing's ever going to work with you, and the fear of what if this keeps getting worse, and also the loneliness of going through this with no one really understanding what you're putting in and how little you're getting out. Not feeling understood is soul destroying, especially when you ask for help and you go to your doctors and you ask to have the tests done to see, what's going on? Why am I not losing weight? Why do I feel tired and sluggish? And you just get told that everything's normal. But of course, that everything is not normal. And, I think also it can feel like people don't believe you when you tell them that you've been cutting back and you've been exercising more. Whether it's friends, family, or even the doctors, it can feel like people aren't really believing you when you say that you're trying really hard and nothing's working. And that's brutal. And to add insult to injury, because you're a really nice person, you feel shame when you get that pang of resentment or jealousy at your friend or your partner or whoever who is getting those wins with seemingly minimal effort. You feel shame at having those feelings, and then you feel bad because you feel bad about it, and it just messes it with your head in so many different ways. Well, first of all, I'm here to tell you that that is completely normal. everyone feels like that about one thing or another. And it's because you're human. It's a very human thing to feel like this, especially when you're putting in all the effort and not seeing the results and other people are. So, as difficult as it might be, we need to practice a bit of self-compassion and, acknowledge when we're feeling like that, and then do our best to let those feelings pass rather than dwelling on them and making ourselves feel worse about the whole thing. Because feeling guilty about how we felt or having those feelings isn't going to achieve anything. It isn't going to get us anywhere. It's going to cause stress, and that's going to make everything worse. And we'll get onto that in a little bit in terms of the effects of stress on the body. But we should acknowledge that our emotions and our responses and how we choose to respond to things and choose to perceive our world has a massive impact on our internal chemistry. So sometimes we not only need to do the work of optimizing our food and our lifestyle, but we also need to do that internal work and that mindset work so that we can help to calm our internal environment. So let's get into why this happens. What is going on here? Why is it so much more difficult for you than it is for other people? There's a few different factors to think about. First of all, men and women are just not comparable. Men lose weight typically far, far easier. Their bodies over time go through far fewer hormonal disturbances. Not only do women have to go through puberty, which is pretty much the only hormonal change that men have to go through, but they also have to go through monthly menstrual cycles, pregnancy, childbirth, potentially miscarriages, maybe fertility treatment, hormonal contraceptives, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, lots of big disruptions to your hormones, and every single one of those leaves a metabolic footprint. And your hormones are inextricably tied to fat burning, how your body responds to food, how your body responds to changes in blood sugars and inflammation, and how your body actually burns fat. So the way that women's bodies behave when you go on a diet and you cut back the calories and you start exercising more is different to how men's bodies respond. And something that's so frustrating is that, when we look at the research, for a very long time, the vast majority of research has been done on men. So everything that we've come to learn about weight loss is based on how men's bodies work, not women's. And a good example of this is the research on fasting. There's been so much interesting research on fasting and how it helps to improve so many different metabolites, cholesterol, blood pressure, helps you to lose weight, helps to improve cardiovascular factors. But when the research finally looked at women, what it found is that yes, it did improve a lot of those metabolic factors, the cholesterol and the blood test results basically. What it didn't do was help women lose weight. And, that's a big topic as to why that happens. And, it comes down to how the restriction and that long period of time without eating is disruptive to hormones, especially for women in perimenopause or someone who's very stressed or has thyroid issues. So many women don't respond well to fasting. But when you Google it and you look at the research, there's so many benefits to fasting. And it comes back to most research has been done on men. And that is why there's such a confused picture out there about what on earth we're supposed to be doing. Now, add to this that a woman's body evolves massively as they go through their first half of their life. From puberty to menopause, there's some big changes that happen. And, there's no point comparing yourself now to how you were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, because as you go through those changes that typically start around your mid-30s, where your ovaries are very, very slowly starting to wind down and your sex hormone levels are fluctuating and generally declining over time, that changes how your body responds to food and exercise. So there's no point comparing 45-year-old you to 35-year-old you, or even 35-year-old you to 25-year-old you. You know, things change, and it's the same for comparing you to your friend, even if your friend is the same age. In my program, The Nourish Method, we work with women who all have pretty much the same goals. They all want to lose weight, they all want to optimize their health, feel more energized, sleep better, and just generally improve their well-being. They've all got those same goals. But when we look at their medical history, their test results, their medication, their symptoms, you know, everything is different. They all have their own unique build up and lead up to this struggle that they're having with their stubborn weight. So while on the outside the problem is the same, they're struggling with their weight, actually the solution is different and the cause is different. And we've been told that it's just food, it's just exercise, it's just about overeating and under exercising. And, you know, it's a very one-dimensional way of looking at things. And when we look at things like that, it implies that we are comparable. And, you know, if you and your friend who weigh the same, eat the same diet and do the same exercise, then you should lose the same amount of weight. But that just isn't true. You know that. You've seen that in practice. I know that. I've seen that in practice many, many times. What we don't get told is that there are so many factors, from sleep to stress to environmental toxins to gut health, hormone balance, deficiencies, intolerances, inflammation, mindset, emotional health, and so much more. All of these things impact how your body burns fat, and all of these things are different for everyone. So if you're finding it really difficult to lose weight and someone else isn't, we need to look at what is going on with these various areas, which bits are out of alignment, which bits are not in balance, which bits are lacking or overstimulated, and how can we bring it all back into harmony. Because when we do that, that's when we start seeing progress that is not only consistent but sustainable as well. And another thing that is so often overlooked is that all of these changes that happen when your hormones start to decrease, that has a bigger effect than just stubborn weight. It also makes you more likely to be anxious, less able to regulate your hunger, and more likely to struggle with cravings, more likely to struggle with sleep, less resilient to stress, and more likely to have low mood, and so many other things. And all these things make it even more difficult for you to make positive health choices. It makes you more likely to, reach for the processed or sugary foods that are going to give you that instant energy hit. It makes you more likely to reach for that really strong coffee to pick up your energy levels and get you through the day. It makes you more likely to choose to sit on the sofa and scroll on your phone instead of doing a bit of food prep for the next day. Now, of course, I've just said that it's not just about how much you eat and how much you exercise. These factors are still important. We still need to make sure that we're fueling on food that is high quality and that we're moving our bodies in a way that makes sense for us. And when we go through these changes, it makes it harder to do that. It makes it harder to make those positive choices. And all of this is why diets that may have worked for you in the past no longer work for you. I can't tell you how often I work with women who have done Slimming World or Weight Watchers for most of their life, or perhaps just, cut back before holidays or Christmas, and they've managed to kind of maintain their weight by just cutting back a couple of times a year. That doesn't work for you anymore as you get into your late 30s, 40s, 50s, because of these changes that are happening in your body. When estrogen declines, it makes your body less sensitive to the effects of insulin. So you're more likely to develop insulin resistance, which essentially makes it more difficult to burn fat. At the same time as estrogen declines, we're more likely to lose muscle mass, and muscle is very metabolically active. It burns calories all the time, even when we're not exercising. So less lean muscle means a slower metabolism. And add to that the impact of a restrictive diet, whether it's something you're only doing now that your weight's starting to go on, or whether you follow restrictive diets your whole life. When you follow a restrictive diet, i.e., something that is low calorie or very low calorie, you lose muscle mass. When you lose weight on that type of diet, 40% of the weight that you lose is actually muscle. It's not just fat. But when you regain the weight, as so many inevitably do, it's largely fat that goes back on, not the muscle you've lost. And what that means is every time you diet, your metabolism decreases. And to add insult to injury, when we are restricting heavily, it doesn't take long for our body to go into conservation mode or starvation mode. Our bodies don't want us to starve and waste away. So when we have a consistent calorie deficit, our bodies will actually save energy by down-regulating certain processes in the body, which means that we actually burn fewer calories to compensate. So when we eat less or when we burn more, our body compensates. It's not a long-term strategy, and it's not only short-term, but it's damaging. And it's particularly damaging when we're in this mid-stage of life. One of the other impacts of estrogen declining is that it makes us less resilient to the impact of stress. Our adrenal glands, which are the glands that produce our stress hormones, actually take over some of the production of our sex hormones as our ovaries start to wind down. And one of the side effects of that is that we are less resilient to stress because our stress hormones and sex hormones are more easily disrupted. And so that means that anything that could cause stress, whether it is financial pressures or a heavy workload or kids or under eating, over exercising, lack of sleep, just rushing around all the time, these things all disrupt our hormones, our sex hormones. That disrupts our insulin levels and our blood sugars, and essentially makes it much more difficult for us to burn fat, makes it more likely that we're going to put on weight around the belly. So bringing this back to why does someone else find it easier than me? Okay, it could be their age, it could be their gender, but it could also be that they are metabolically more balanced. Maybe they haven't done diets over the years. Maybe they haven't had a very high stress level. Maybe they haven't had a very high hormonal toll and fewer hormonal events. Maybe their body isn't in that starvation, conservation mode. Maybe their toxic load isn't so high, their gut health is more balanced, maybe they're less inflamed. There could be lots of reasons why someone else finds it easier, but the good news is that you can be that person too by getting to the root of what is causing this stubborn weight and going that level deeper and really saying no to these quick fix surface level strategies of just focusing on how much you're eating and how much you're exercising. That is what I help my clients do inside the Nourish method. And if you would like an approach that is targeted to your specific needs and imbalances and gets to the root of what is causing stubborn weight, fatigue, anxiety, poor sleep, digestive issues, or whatever it might be. We work with so many women with different goals, but if you want to get to the root of what's going on for you so that you can live your best life, optimize your health, feel lighter, energized, and more confident, and do that in a way where there's far, far less trial and error. You're working from an understanding of what your body truly needs to be feeling at its very best, then that is what we do. That is what I help my clients with. And we get incredible results. We transform lives, and I want to help transform yours as well. So if that is intriguing to you, then use the link in the description or the show notes to find out about booking a free discovery call. On this discovery call, we're going to dig deep into what is going on for you, what's keeping you stuck, why aren't you seeing results, what might be blocking your progress, and what it is we need to do to get you to where you want to be. And once we've established that, we can figure out what it might look like to work together. And there's no obligation, the call is free, and if you decide that we're not for you, that's absolutely fine. You're not going to be pressurized into anything at all. So if you're curious about what it could look like to take a really targeted, focused approach that is unique to you, not a one size fits all generalized plan, then make sure you take a look at that link where you can read more about booking your discovery call. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you found this episode helpful, and I hope that it's relieved a little bit of the guilt that you feel when you get that pang of resentment and jealousy. You're absolutely human. It's totally normal to feel like that. If you did enjoy this episode, then please make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you like, and drop me a comment if you're watching on YouTube. I'd love to know if you've experienced these types of moments where you could feel a bit triggered by other people and either their comments about themselves or how easy it is for them to lose weight. I'd love to know what you've experienced as well. So let's get the conversation going. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one.